This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Shell-shocked. Egg prices crack records, making breakfast a lot more expensive, and it could be a while before prices recede.
Solid sales. Americans went shopping in July, and there's one item that could save the retailers.
Economic ripple. Why calculating the full cost of the damage from that Colorado mine spill could be a very tricky task. All that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Thursday, August 13th.
Good evening, everyone. As you know, it is widely expected that the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates sometime this year. And today, we got another batch of economic data that bolsters that case. But there's one piece that's been missing from that equation: inflation. And that's where a new government report comes in on the price of something near and dear to all of us: egg prices. The Department of Agriculture reports that prices are at an all-time high, following the worst outbreak of bird flu in decades. It's basically classic supply and demand: fewer eggs, higher prices. And as Morgan Brennan reports from Des Moines, Iowa, the shortage, not just for eggs, may be far from over.
Avian flu. Officials now call it the worst animal virus outbreak in U.S. history. It's been more than 2 months since the last case was detected, but the damage is done. 48 million chickens and turkeys had to be destroyed, the lion's share in Iowa. After months of uncertainty, state officials are finally lifting the quarantines affecting so many parts of the state. And now, some farmers are starting to restock. The first in Iowa to welcome new birds is Brad Moline, whose 43,000 turkey farm became infected in May.
It was a huge relief, no question about it.
His new turkeys will begin hitting the market later this fall. Farms in Minnesota are beginning to repopulate as well, but so far it's turkey operations, not yet egg facilities, which suffered the steepest losses.
We anticipate there'll be birds back in barns as early as September in some cases, certainly ramping up through the end of this year, and really strong egg production coming back on the start of 2016.
Still, it'll take about 12 to 18 months for U.S. production to return to normal. In the meantime, egg prices have soared, with a wholesale price for a dozen Midwest large eggs up more than 140% since April. Analysts expect prices to remain elevated into 2016. But even as farmers begin to get back to business, the entire industry is bracing for more bird flu this fall, when waterfowl carrying the virus fly south. Producers, state officials, and the USDA are scrambling to prepare.
We are preparing for the fall and spring. We've got a lot of planning going on within USDA, but also within the states themselves, especially all of the major poultry producing states and with the industry.
Farmers are beefing up biosecurity and performing routine tests on flocks. And in many poultry producing states, including Georgia and North Carolina, which haven't been hit by bird flu, response drills. The USDA says it will also have a vaccine ready if the need arises.
But it's not just farmers and consumers feeling the impact of bird flu. The ripple effects extend here to the Iowa State Fair, which normally has 1,000 poultry exhibits. Because of bird flu, fairs across the U.S. are banning live birds, instead filling the space with pictures and educational displays. For a Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan in Des Moines, Iowa.
As for that economic data we referred to a moment or so ago, the number of U.S. workers filing new applications for jobless benefits rose slightly in the past week, but at a level still consistent with a strengthening labor market. Jobless claims increased 5,000 to a seasonally adjusted 274,000. The average for the past month fell to its lowest level in 15 years.
Retail sales rebounded in July, suggesting the economy is growing solidly in the third quarter. June's retail sales were also revised higher to unchanged from its original 0.3% drop. The strong sales were due to increased purchases of everything from automobiles to furniture.
Change of pace on Wall Street today after numerous triple-digit moves. Stocks ended basically near flat. A drop in energy shares did offset the positive economic news we just mentioned and those stronger than expected results from Cisco we told you about last night. By the closing bell, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 5 points to 17,408. NASDAQ lost 10. The S&P 500 fell 2. The big story was in the oil pits today. The price of crude tumbled to a 6.5-year low midday on a big rise in U.S. stockpiles. By the settle, crude was off 2.5% to $42.23.
8 banks have reportedly agreed to pay $2 billion to settle lawsuits claiming they rigged the currency markets. That's according to Reuters. The banks include Barclays, Bank of America, Citigroup, Goldman Sachs, and others. Speaking of Goldman Sachs, the firm will also pay more than $250 million to settle a mortgage-related lawsuit. The suit claimed that the bank defrauded investors about the safety of mortgage-backed securities purchased in 2007 and 2008, that time, of course, leading up to the financial crisis. As part of the agreement, court papers show that Goldman denied liability.
The brokerage firm Edward Jones will pay $20 million to settle claims it overcharged muni bond customers. The settlement was made with the SEC, which said that Edward Jones didn't offer new bonds at the initial offering price and instead took the bonds into their own inventory and then sold them at a higher price. The agency also described this settlement as the first of its kind.
Authorities have reportedly launched an investigation into the former chairman of Dean Foods, the country's largest milk processor. As reported by the Wall Street Journal, they're looking into whether Thomas Davis leaked inside information to a professional gambler, who then may have tipped off golfer Phil Mickelson. Kate Kelly is here. She's been following the story for us all along. So can you explain briefly, Kate, what this is all about?
So, Sue, just simply put, insider trading involves an individual using non-public and material information that actually could move a stock once it's out, and trading upon it at a time when most other people, other than company board members and so on, don't have the information. It's illegal in many cases, although it's a bit of a gray area in terms of U.S. case law. The allegation being investigated here, and we don't know what really happened, we don't even know if a case will be brought, is whether or not this board member, who was non-executive chairman for a time, passed on information ultimately to the golfer Phil Mickelson about what was in 2012 a deal the company was doing, and whether or not Mickelson, who got the information ostensibly secondhand from a middleman, this professional gambler, was able to trade upon that. And we don't even know if he traded for a profit. But that's what they're looking into. That is the SEC as well as the Justice Department.
Couple of quick questions here. What do we know about the relationship of this former non-executive chairman and Mr. Mickelson? How did Mickelson get the information? Would Mickelson have had to have known both the guy and that the information was protected to be guilty of any charges or to face some kind of charge?
Great questions. So Thomas Davis, based on what I've read, did know this gambler, Billy Walters. And there was some, I don't know whether it was a friendship, a business relationship, some relationship there, according to the newspaper. And Walters knows Phil Mickelson. So it isn't clear whether or not Davis and Mickelson directly know each other. And that could potentially be a problem if the feds try to bring an insider trading case. Why? To make a long story short, recent judges' decisions have suggested that there has to be, if you will, a quid pro quo between the provider of the information and the person who uses it, which in this case is Davis and Mickelson. Some understanding on the provider's part, on Davis's part, that he's benefiting Mickelson and vice versa. If that isn't there, it could be difficult to bring a case.
What about the average investor? Does this case have implications for the average investor, or perhaps not?
So the whole problem with insider trading, Sue, is the idea that it makes the markets unfair for other people. So if you have a lead on some information that I don't have and you're able to trade profitably upon it and I'm not, that's an uneven playing field. So what the government has tried hard to do in recent years is to root out some of these cases to serve as deterrents to people who might do this in the future. Now, again, it's early days on this case, but if the facts are proven and if it is sort of a classic insider trading case, the idea would be that someone like Phil Mickelson perhaps had an unfair information advantage, maybe due to his connections or his wealth, that average investors didn't have. And that moved a stock in a way that may have disadvantaged others.
Others, right. Kate, thank you very much.
Thank
Keep
you.
following the story for us.
Will do.
Kate Kelly.
Days after an EPA-led team accidentally released 3 million gallons of toxic sludge from an abandoned mine into a Colorado river, the economic damage is just starting to be tallied. And as Scott Cohn reports from Durango, Colorado, there are thousands of mines just like that one throughout the West.
To look at it, it seems like things are back to normal. The sickening orange sludge has dissipated, but the economic impact along the Animas River has not. The river is still closed to recreation because officials are worried about people kicking up the sediment that's left on the riverbed and on the rocks. And that's just the start of the economic impact here in the thick of the tourist season. Downstream in New Mexico, the EPA is trucking in emergency water supplies for irrigation and feeding livestock. And it's also reinvigorated the controversy about tens of thousands of abandoned mines throughout the West. The Navajo Nation, which says that this spill has affected its very way of life, says it is suing the EPA and says that this site should be designated a Superfund site, freeing up billions of dollars of federal cleanup money. The problem, though, in an area that's heavily dependent on tourism, is the idea of designating this as a Superfund site. There has always been a delicate balance between politics, science, and the economy. This spill may have shifted that balance somewhat and again revived the debate. Scott Cohn, Nightly Business Report, Durango, Colorado.
Still ahead, Cuba is one of the least connected countries in the world. So why is Airbnb, which relies on the internet, making a big push into the island nation?
Earlier in the program, we told you about the rise in retail sales in July. One item people are buying more of is denim. That's good news for apparel retailers since there's a lot of money in jeans. Just last year, global jeans market was worth more than $100 billion by some estimates. And as Courtney Reagan tells us, the fashion trend is picking up steam right before the key back-to-school shopping season.
Part of Target's back-to-school messaging insists denim is a school supply. And this year, the retailer might be right. While the back-to-school season is historically one of the most important for denim, last year sales of jeans wear dropped dramatically as athletic wear sales soared, leading many to declare the death of denim. But now there are signs that denim isn't so dead after all. Investment bank FBR conducted an online search survey and found that the number of consumers searching for denim online increased 5% compared to a drop last year. And analysts say it's because manufacturers have reinvented the back-to-school staple.
This is denim's way of fighting back. They're adding more innovation. They're adding more synthetic fibers and fabrics to the denim, not just cotton, and that's making it, more softer, more stretch, and also they're adding new washes in denim too to make it just more appealing, something different so the consumer doesn't feel like they're buying the same thing.
New demand for denim is particularly good news for retailers betting on back to school. Tracking group NPD says millennials represent the largest dollar segment when it comes to jean sales, and the group is showing renewed interest in denim. After years of skinny jeans being the it denim trend, retailers like American Eagle and Abercrombie are turning to a new style.
They're really trying to bring back that wide leg denim. I think they've tried to bring it back for a couple years now, but the consumer just hasn't accepted it. But it sounds like they feel like this could be the year. They're stocking it in much bigger presence this year.
On its earnings call, Ralph Lauren execs said it had a terrific consumer response to denim offerings across all of its brand tiers. While Macy's results were mostly disappointing, the department store's CFO called for a resurgence in denim, a strong point for the quarter. VF Corp, the company that owns jean brands Wrangler, Lee, and Seven for All Mankind, says global jeanswear revenues were up 6% in the most recent quarter and up mid-single digits in the Americas, signaling challenges in the mid-tier U.S. denim market have begun to abate. But unlike the athleisure clothing market, which most think is more of a fundamental lifestyle switch than just a fad, the denim resurgence may be more short-lived. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Courtney Reagan.
We begin tonight's market focus with a late earnings beat from Nordstrom. The retailer announcing an increase in quarterly sales thanks partly to a recent acquisition and its Canadian store's performance. The company also raising its annual sales growth guidance. Shares were initially higher in after-hours trading. In the regular session, the stock was off a fraction to $74.92. A disappointing quarter from El Pollo Loco. The chicken restaurant chain missed on the top line while earnings were pretty much in line with forecasts. Shares slid initially after the close. During the regular trading session, the stock was up about 3% to $18.36. Tough day for shares of Kohl's, the retailer missing earnings and revenue estimates. It blamed a late back-to-school start and a sales tax holiday that shoppers took advantage of. Shares tumbled almost 9% to finish at $56.11.
Mixed quarterlies from Dillard's. It beat on the bottom line while revenue missed analyst estimates. Weakness came from its home and furniture categories while shoe sales were strong. The stock rose 2% to 97.03. A boutique investment bank called Houlihan Lokey is making its Wall Street debut, and shares today priced $1 below the firm's range at $21 apiece. The company raised $220 million in that offering. Those shares up more than 6.5% today to $22.40. A management reboot at Coca-Cola. The Dow component named James Quincy president and chief operating officer today. That spurred speculation that the longtime company veteran could take the top spot at the soda maker one day. The stock fell a fraction today to 41.10.
Samsung hopes sleeker sells. The company introducing a host of products to fend off the gains being made by Apple. And it's not just a new device that Samsung is banking on, but a new way to pay for things, creating a direct challenge to Apple Pay. But is it enough to dominate that industry? John Fort reports.
Samsung today in New York City with three pretty big announcements. One was phones. We were expecting the Galaxy Note 5, and we got it, but we also got a version that's curved. It's not called the Note Edge, it's the Galaxy S6 Plus Edge, but it's a 5.7-inch screen, same display quality, which is independently judged to be at the top of the industry, and this curved screen. Of course, Samsung had trouble delivering those curved screens early in the year. That caused some problems with revenue at the company, but CEO J.K. Shin here doubling down on his bet on that. Of course, that comes ahead of an expected iPhone launch next month. Samsung getting out ahead of that, trying to hold down its ecosystem. As part of that, Samsung also announced Samsung Pay. It's like Apple Pay, being able to use your phone for contactless payments at various retailers, but the difference here is this uses a magnetic field technology instead of what Apple uses, which is called NFC. And that means this payment system should work everywhere you can swipe a credit card. We spoke to MasterCard and Visa today. Both of them say it is secure. Of course, hackers are sure to attack this because it's able to be used many more places. But Samsung taking a bold step here in payments along with phones. And then finally, also live streaming is something that they staked out. You've heard of Periscope. Well, they're doing live streaming through YouTube with these new phones as well. The older phones will be able to do some of this as well with software updates. But Samsung making a mark in the U.S. now ahead of Apple's launch is expected next month in smartphone season, and the competition is heating up. For Nightly Business Report, I'm John Fort.
Coming up, how 96 million little black balls can help combat California's record drought.
And here's a look at what to watch for tomorrow. The Producer Price Index is out, and that, of course, is an important measure of inflation. A read on industrial production as well, and also on the data front, a check on the health of the consumer with the Consumer Sentiment Report. And that is what to watch for Friday.
Secretary of State John Kerry will be in Havana tomorrow to raise the American flag and formally reopen a U.S. embassy in Cuba. It's another step to normalize diplomatic and economic ties between the two countries, and as relations thaw, many companies are looking to do business in Cuba. As Michelle Caruso-Cabrera reports from Havana, no company has been more aggressive than Airbnb, the online room rental site.
These four women are visiting Cuba from Oakland, California, as a birthday celebration for Tanja Jacks. When they tried to book a hotel, they found there was a problem.
You can't really use your credit cards to book online
at hotels.
So that was the major challenge.
U.S. credit cards still don't work in Cuba, so enter California-based Airbnb, an online booking site that allows people to rent private homes and apartments. The women chose to stay at this beautifully restored neoclassical home, which sleeps four. It's costing them $100 a night, and they paid in advance with their credit card on Airbnb. Airbnb launched in Cuba last April and within 2 months had more than 1,000 homes listed, including apartments like this one from Marta Vitorita. Turns out Cubans like Marta have been renting rooms in their homes for decades because it was one of the only private sector activities permitted by the communist government. When Fidel Castro seized power in a coup in 1959, he quickly took over every business. So there was plenty of supply from people who wanted to make extra money legally. What Marta likes about Airbnb is she gets paid no matter what, even if the client doesn't show up, which used to happen a lot in the past.
And to be in BRB is like a miracle.
Jordi Torres is the Airbnb executive in charge of Cuba.
Airbnb is based on the internet. This is a country with hardly any internet. How do you overcome that hurdle?
Cubans are really entrepreneurs, and they have fixed the issue for us. For those that don't have internet, they have found ways to leverage local connections to represent many.
Here in Cuba, there's a sort of gray market for internet access. Those lucky few that do have a legal connection to the internet manage the Airbnb listings for those who don't.
Airbnb says Cubans who have rented out their homes have received on average $90 for each stay. It's a huge amount of money in a country where the average salary is only $20 per month. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Michelle Caruso Cabrera in Havana.
And in drought-stricken California, reservoirs have now turned black, and officials want them that way. Black plastic balls are covering water sources in the Los Angeles area as a way to preserve that precious resource. Jane Wells has our story tonight.
3, 2, 1, shade balls away!
In California's epic drought, no idea is too crazy. Not even releasing into LA reservoirs plastic balls you might find in the McDonald's play area.
We started putting shade balls on here about 2.5 years ago.
This week, the LA Department of Water and Power released the last of 96 million so-called shade balls on top of open reservoirs. Originally, the drought wasn't the reason for the balls. The EPA ordered open reservoirs covered to improve water quality by avoiding bad chemical reactions and algae from direct sunlight on the water. But along the way, the DWP discovered the shade balls also keep 300 million gallons of water a year from evaporating.
That's equivalent for us to about 2,700 average homes here in Los Angeles. That's enough water to fill almost 5 Rose Bowls full of water every year. So it's a dramatic amount of water.
The idea for the shade balls came from a department biologist who saw them being used at airports in between runways where water was puddled to cover the water and keep the birds away. And it's a lot cheaper than the original idea for this reservoir to buy the world's largest pool cover, which would have cost hundreds of millions of dollars and would have required the building of a temporary reservoir while this one was fitted. This idea is almost 90% cheaper.
But we came up with the idea of putting these balls, manufactured here locally, shade balls, 96 million of them at a cost of just $35 million.
California is mandating other changes to save water, like low-flow shower heads. But nothing has gotten as much attention as the shade balls, which are supposed to last a decade. Will the rains return by then? Maybe sooner. El Nino is coming, and new images from NASA show the warming Pacific in red and white ahead of the drenching El Nino of 1997. So strong, they're giving this new one a nickname, Godzilla. For Nightly Business Report, Jane Wells, Los Angeles.
And finally tonight, a story brought to you by the letters H, B, and O. The pay TV network owned by Time Warner has agreed to a 5-year partnership with the nonprofit behind the children's television program Sesame Street. Starting this fall, new episodes of the show will air first on HBO before appearing on PBS 9 months later. The deal allows Sesame Workshop to double the number of new episodes it makes yearly and gives HBO a bigger foothold in children's programming.
It's so competitive.
Yeah.
That particular niche, it's just growing by leaps and bounds.
Cookie Monster on HBO.
Cookie Monster and Big Bird going to HBO.
Yeah.
All right. That'll do it for Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sue Herrera, and we want to remind you this is the time of year your public television station seeks your support.
I'm Tyler Matheson. Thank you for your support. Thanks for watching, and have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.